December 4th, 1924. William Nelson McClintock, called Billy, age 21, died in Kenilworth in the Chicago area. He was born April 3rd, 1903. As he lay in bed at the end, his fiancee, Isabel Pope, had left his bedside at his request to go procure a marriage license. The two were supposed to be married in February. However, perhaps Billy, thinking the end was near, he wanted to speed things up. He told her, quote, "I know I'm going to die, but I would like to make you my wife before I do," end quote. When she returned to his place with a license and a preacher, Billy had become unconscious and would pass away before the ceremony could take place. Billy had been sick with typhoid fever for the last 2 or so weeks in the home of his guardians, Mr. and Mrs. William D. Shepherd. He was orphaned well over a decade earlier when both of his parents died, and he came under the care and guardianship of the Shepherds. Billy was only 3 when his father, a retired capitalist, was killed in a car accident in 1907. 2 years later, in 1909, his mother would pass. After his father had died, the Shepherds had come to see Mrs. McClintock, an old college mate of Mrs. Shepherd, and the Shepherds would stay on, living with the widow and her son. And when Mrs. McClintock died, the Shepherds would continue on to care for Billy per the guidelines in her will. A sad, simple story, right? No. Billy, on his parents' death, had been left some millions of dollars that he would take control of when he turned 21. He died at 21. Money, the root of all evil, the pathway to happiness and ease, and sometimes also pain. Paired with death, somehow it can tear families apart. December 6th, Billy, now known in the paper as the millionaire orphan, was laid to rest today in a private service in Chicago. He and his fiancée Isabel had been a couple since their time in school, in her last year of high school. He started going to Dartmouth College. Isabel attended Northwestern University, closer to home. They had agreed when they were attending college so far away from each other that they would not bind themselves to each other. Basically, they could see other people if they wanted to. But during the summer, they would spend time together. The Pope family went to northern Wisconsin every summer, and Billy would go with them, with Isabel's sister as a chaperone. They would hike and talk and read to each other. Billy would then change course academically, leaving Dartmouth and taking business courses instead to ready himself for ministering to his own large estate, which he had only received some months earlier. Again, though his parents had been gone some 15 years, he wouldn't gain possession of the inheritance until age 21. Billy and Isabel committed to each other and planned a future wedding. Now, as usual, after someone passes, we get mentions of a will. Mr. Shepherd, an attorney with whom Billy lived, said that he had drawn Billy's will shortly after he had come of age earlier that year. Shepherd would say that Isabel, Mrs. Shepherd, his wife, and attorney Carl Siegfried were all remembered in the will. The will apparently had Shepherd, his guardian, and an attorney as the chief beneficiary. The estate apparently is worth $2 million or so. The will also gives Isabel, his fiancée, a yearly payout of $8,000. Well, it's Christmas Eve, and instead of ordering a delightfully yummy Christmas feast, we have an order for the exhumation of Billy's body to have an autopsy performed. Why? I mean, he had typhoid fever, right? First, there was a discrepancy in the filing of a prescription for Billy at a Kenilworth drugstore. The prescription was dated November 26 for flu capsules, but according to the drugstore records, it had been filled the day before, on November 25th. Second, Isabel's father declared that the couple's marriage, his daughter Isabel and Billy, was discouraged by Mr. Shepherd, foster dad and chief beneficiary. Mr. Pope would say, quote, "The Shepherds have ignored Isabel since McClintock's death, even to the extent of failing to send her any little memento of Billy," end quote. Rumors of inconsistencies became stronger and turned into allegations, which became a demand for more, a probe into Billy's death beyond just him getting typhoid naturally. The attending physician said that they believed he had, by all appearances, hemorrhagic typhoid contracted from, they're assuming, some oysters he had eaten. They would not comment or speculate about poison. Welcome to autopsy. The Shepherds, enjoying the Christmas holiday season in Albuquerque and needing to get away after Billy's death, would say that the investigation was ridiculous. Billy had died from a natural form of typhoid fever, and they refused to say anything further, except the Shepherds may have to return to Chicago sooner. Typhoid fever. Let's go over what that is. Per the World Health Organization, quote, typhoid fever is a life-threatening infection caused by the bacterium Salmonella typhi. It is usually spread through contaminated food or water. Once Salmonella typhi bacteria are ingested, they multiply and spread into the bloodstream. Urbanization and climate change have the potential to increase the global burden of typhoid. In addition, increasing resistance to antibiotic treatment is making it easier for typhoid to spread in communities that lack access to safe drinking water or adequate sanitation. Salmonella typhi lives only in humans. Persons with typhoid fever carry the bacteria in their bloodstream and intestinal tract. Symptoms include prolonged high fever, fatigue, headache, nausea, abdominal pain, constipation, or diarrhea. Some patients may have a rash. Severe cases may lead to serious complications or even death. Typhoid fever can be confirmed through blood testing. End quote. The treatment for typhoid fever is a certain type of antibiotic, which wasn't invented until 1948. Ampicillin would not emerge as another treatment until 1961. December 26. Shepherds are returning to Chicago on the advice of their attorneys that they need to be hanging about while this investigation is happening. However, before leaving Albuquerque, the Shepherds would say that they never had an issue with Isabel or with the impending marriage, which was to have taken place February 22, 1925, that, in fact, they welcomed it. The only objection they had was when the couple was trying to get married while Billy was dying. Shepherd originally told Isabel that man and woman would have to apply in person together to get a marriage license. Later, he would say that he had lied to her to save her feelings, that Shepherd would say that he had objected because it was Billy who wanted to wait for the wedding day or as soon as he got better if it wasn't until after that. Shepherd would also say that the claim he and his wife had remarked that they wondered what they would do when Billy married was not true. He did admit knowing that Billy had planned to make a new will once he and Isabel were married. That shouldn't have surprised anyone, that Billy would want to do that. Doctors and toxicologists are getting their reports ready for the coroner's jury. Subpoenas have been issued for Dr. Rufus B. Stolp, who had doctored Billy before Billy passed away. Maria Gardner, former maid, along with Eva Nelson, another domestic, who had both witnessed the signing of the will, and 2 nurses who had attended Billy while he was ill. Coroner Oscar Wolf has said that yes, there is the presence of typhoid germs, but he has still not determined the cause of death. The death certificate originally stated that he had died of typhoid fever. One F.T. Bradigan of Battle Creek, Michigan, once worked in an Illinois research laboratory. Back in 1919, some 5 years earlier, let's say, Bradigan and Dr. Oscar Olson brought a couple of men to the laboratory. Dr. Oscar Olson's name will come up a bit later. Let's just say right now that presently in late 1924, Dr. Olson has been dead for about 3 years. Dr. Olson is also the brother of Judge Harry Olson, Chief Justice of the Municipal Court. The 2 men that came to visit were Billy McClintock and Mr. Shepherd. Bradigan would say that Shepherd came to the lab several times with Dr. Olson, and also 3 or 4 times by himself. During his visits, Shepherd would show an interest in typhoid germs, explaining to Bradigan that he was a chemist and a druggist. A few times Bradigan would say that a woman introduced to him as Mrs. Shepherd would also accompany Shepherd, but she would not go into the lab. The last time Bradigan saw the couple was at Dr. Oscar Olson's funeral, but he did not chit-chat with them. Joseph Savage, assistant state's attorney, said, quote, "Our investigation is including all possibilities of the case, not excluding that of typhoid inoculation," and the possibility of improper treatment of the patient, such as the feeding of solid foods. Our examination of Dr. Rupert Stolp, attending physician, today failed to elicit any confirmation of the possibility that McClintock's death had been hastened or his illness intentionally aggravated. Dr. Stolp told us that he was called in on November 23rd and that from then until his death, December 4th, the patient was constantly under his observation and under the care of nurses assigned to the case by himself. 2 of the nurses we shall examine tomorrow. Dr. Stolp said that the reported request that visitors not come to the residence was made at his instance in the interest of the patient's health and to keep the servants. He said the servants had complained that there was too much company and that they had to get too many meals for guests. End quote. Dr. Stolp apparently also said that when he was first called to the house, Billy seemed to have had some sort of nose and throat infection, and while sick, he didn't show any symptoms of typhoid fever. Until days later. December 27th, it's come out that during the autopsy of Billy's body, the doctors found solid food. Solid food at this time is considered fatal in typhoid cases. Solid food apparently can bring on a hemorrhage as the body tries to get rid of the food in the body. Shepard, when asked about his lab field trips, would say that he was interested in bacteriology, that the lab was in the same building as a doctor that he had gone to for routine visits, and while visiting there, he had been shown tubercular germ cultures. That was the extent of it. He would also now admit that Isabel had indeed been barred from Billy's room because she would not observe the rules for visitors, and it was irritating Billy. She would read the nurse's chart and then read the contents to Billy. December 29th. Shepard's wanting to move forward with Billy's fortune, intending to separate it into several funds. Once on his and his wife's death, much of it will be used towards mankind's betterment, plus the trust fund for Isabel with the $8,000 per year annuity she was promised in the will, and then the rest to several charities. January 1st, 1925. It's unofficial that there is nothing in the chemical analysis of Billy's body to show anything other than a natural occurrence of typhoid fever. But as usual, because things take time, there are still some incomplete tests. Shepard's attorney, Robert Stahl, is trying to say that this investigation has been brought about by an enemy to Shepard. He's not referring to Isabel or to family cousins. He won't say who he's referring to. Let's just say that he's probably referring to a certain judge we're going to mention again in a minute. January 7th. Billy's examination has started up an inquiry into the death of Dr. Oscar Olson. You know, the Dr. Olson who took Shepard to the lab, who is the brother of Judge Olson and who has been dead for 3 years. Judge Olson is the one demanding exhumation of his brother's body. He believes his brother died under suspicious circumstances. And not only that, but that the death of Billy's mother, Emma Nelson McClintock, was also suspicious, to the point that Judge Olson refused to be a pallbearer at her funeral, and that the state's attorney had not done his due diligence with regards to that case. Shepard would say Judge Olson told lies. Judge Olson would say that when Shepard had visited Dr. Olson, Shepard had brought the doctor some fruit and would be left alone for several minutes. Dr. Olson's cause of death had been heart disease caused by ptomaine poisoning. Judge Olson would also question the authenticity of Billy's will. We're jumping ahead over a month to February 20th. A little physical altercation would occur between Judge Olson and Edwin Hedrick, Shepard's counsel at the inquest into Billy's death. Judge Olson had been extremely heavily involved in this investigation, and for a sec I was thinking there had to be a conflict of interest, but he's not the presiding judge over any of this hullabaloo. Anywho, lawyer Hedrick called Judge Olson a dirty rat. The judge struck Hedrick with his fist, though witnesses would say it just grazed Hedrick's chin and chest with no real effect. Hedrick would strike back, but his blow was also said to have fallen a bit short. Come on, guys. Do we need to take y'all to the gym? As everyone in the courtroom was on their feet, any further skirmishing had ended. Dr. G. Fosberg would testify about how Shepard would ask questions about typhoid bacteria and poison. Shepard had visited him twice the previous summer, saying that a relative had died under mysterious circumstances and he wanted the body exhumed. Shepard would say he was a chemist and bacteriologist and wanted to know what kind of evidence typhoid and 2 poisons would show up on autopsy, and about the advanced stage of typhus germs. Now, remember, Billy didn't die until December. This discussion was a handful of months before that. 2 weeks after this conversation, Shepard came again to chit-chat about several deadly poisons showing up on post-mortem exam. Shepard never said who the relative was, just that it was some young man. February 26th, Mrs. Shepard, foster mother to Billy, would refuse to testify. Chauffeur would testify that the Shepards did bar Isabel from the home while Billy was very ill. That witnesses, the servants, would say the will was not signed until 2 days after it was dated, after it had been drawn up by Shepard and presented to Billy for signature, and that the witnesses were not fluent in English. February 27th, Dr. C.C. Feynman, president of the National School of Applied Science, plus 2 others from the school, are considered future witnesses. Amelia Hall, a nurse who attended Billy during his illness, testified that Shepard had told her that Billy said he did not want to marry Isabel until he was well, and that the food was obtained from the refrigerator and prepared by Eva Nelson, the Shepard's cook. John Marchand, one of those National University of Sciences former employees, said that Shepard was the one with whom he was discussing about taking a bacteriological course, that Shepard had also asked about the cost of a medical laboratory in connection with the course. What, like build your own toxic lab? March 13th, boom, 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 quite a fruitful 12 hours. Number 1, Dr. C.C. Feynman, the head of the National University of Sciences, would say that Shepard had been a 1-week student at the university, and as he had left after the 1 week, he also might have taken 3 tubes of deadly germ cultures. Number 2, the summoning of the Shepards to the state attorney's office to be confronted with what Feynman said. And number 3, a request to the grand jury from the state attorney's office to also take up the issue of witness tampering. We're not waiting for the coroner's report. We're going from the inquest straight to the grand jury. There was a night of grilling of Dr. Feynman, and at some point, Dr. Feynman and John Marchand, they would come to fisticuffs when, after they were questioned separately at the state attorney's office, they were left alone and they began to chit-chat. Apparently, the separated questioning yielded no changes in their story, that someone, allegedly Shepard, had written to the university about bacteria courses, but that neither of them knew what had come of the letter, and that nothing more had come of it. So, of course, while they were left alone, the state attorney people were listening in, Dr. Feynman observing, quote, "You know, it's quite mysterious what became of that letter," end quote. Quote, "Nothing at all mysterious about it," end quote, Marchand is said to have answered. "What do you mean?" Dr. Feynman demanded, according to the listeners. "I mean, you know where the letter is," Marchand is said to have replied. "You read it, and you know all about it. What's the use of beating about the bush?" "I don't know anything about that letter," Dr. Feynman is said to have almost shouted. "And you're a liar," Marchand is said to have shouted right back. Wow, we've got a judge versus lawyer. We've got a scientist versus a former science salesman. Someone call the MMA. So the attorney's office personnel would barge into the office and separate the pugilists. And Feynman would admit that Shepard had written the letter, that Shepard's signature was on the letter, and he had no reason to doubt that it wasn't Shepard's writing. Feynman would say, quote, "Soon after that, Shepard came to the university to attend some lectures. But he didn't seem particularly interested in the general course. He appeared to want some specific instruction. He was interested, above all, in bacteriology. But altogether, he wasn't at the university more than a week," end quote. March 15th, Shepard would deny all the school stuff. March 16th, State Attorney Robert Crowe would say at the grand jury gathering that, quote, "We have sufficient evidence to warrant an indictment. If things go as I expect, Shepard will be charged formally with murder before night," end quote. They have 4 major witnesses, and their case is this. 1. That Shepard drew up young McClintock's will, making himself the chief beneficiary. 2. That Shepard feared he would lose his fortune if Billy married Miss Pope, and so tried to block the wedding. 3. That before the young couple could go through with the ceremony, McClintock died of typhoid fever at the Shepard home. 4. That Shepard had secretly studied disease germs, particularly typhoid, and after Billy's death spent considerable sums of money in an attempt to hide the fact he had studied germs. Number 5. That Shepard actually had access to typhoid germs while he studied bacteriology at the National University of Science, and that 3 tubes of germs disappeared when he discontinued his lessons. Now, if the 4 major witnesses don't do the job, they do have other backup witnesses. Basically, Feynman testified, quote, "I gave those typhoid germs to Shepard. He told me in plain words that he wanted them to inoculate somebody with and that it was $1 million deal. He told me he would pay me plenty when he got the $1 million, end quote. "You're a liar," Shepard retorted. Shepard maintained to Robert K. Crow, state's attorney, that he had never seen Feynman before. Feynman declared he told the truth, "And you can't deny it," he said to Shepard. Feynman would also say that Shepard had offered him $20,000 to keep his mouth shut. Feynman, quote, "About a year ago, Shepard and myself met several times. We planned how McClintock might be inoculated with the typhoid germs, which I had given to Shepard in the fall of 1923. I knew Shepard was going to give the germs to McClintock. It was the understanding that Shepard was to wait until young McClintock had signed a will leaving the money to Shepard, and then at the first favorable opportunity, he was to be given the germs. From time to time, I met Shepard in hotels in the Loop. We talked over our plans. Finally, the moment arrived. The boy had made his will, leaving the money to Shepard. The first dose of germs was given McClintock in a glass of cold water. After that, the doses were repeated, and his condition aggravated. A week after McClintock became ill, Shepard and myself met, and he asked me what to do. I told him to administer a cathartic to the youth when the latter's stomach was empty. I explained that it would penetrate the intestines and cause almost certain death. At the time, Shepard asked me for advice as to how he could make the fever more deadly. McClintock was very ill. Shepard told me he was after the McClintock fortune, and he was going to get it by getting the boy. I yielded to his plea after he assured me that when he got the fortune in his hands, he would share with me, end quote. Feynman would also say that a promise to him of $100,000 was to be given to him by Shepard if he provided Shepard with the germs and Shepard got the inheritance. Dr. G. Fosberg testified again, now in front of the grand jury, that Shepard had consulted with him about poisons and their post-mortem detection. Also, John Marchand, former salesman for the Science University, who Shepard had consulted with about university courses. March 18th, grand jury has indicted both Shepard and Feynman in connection with Billy's death before Chief Justice Hopkins of the Criminal Court. Not only did they believe that Billy had been injected with typhoid germs, but that poisons in the form of aconitine, prussic acid, and morphine had also been injected. The court also dismissed Shepard's petition for a writ of habeas corpus, so no bail, and sent him to jail until he was formally arraigned. Judge Olson still believes that the Shepards poisoned his brother and also believes that the Shepards were involved in the death of Billy's mother many years earlier in an attempt to get the McClintock money and property. Isabel's attorneys state she is owed what she would have been given had she married Billy, because they would have married had it not been for what the Shepards had allegedly done. 10 of Billy's cousins don't like that, and don't like, of course, Shepard getting nearly everything, but do allow that Isabel should get the $8,000 per year annuity that was stated in the will. Yikes. The state plans to exhume Billy's mother's body, Mrs. Emma Nelson McClintock, and Judge Olson's brother, Dr. Oscar Olson. And they have found someone who identified Shepard as having attended the university for a week with regards to bacteriology courses, even though Shepard denies any of that having taken place. March 19th. His attorney, William Scott Stewart, would say, quote, "Our charge is that this is a giant conspiracy in which the defendant is about to be deprived of his rights under a will," end quote. Wait, wasn't Edwin Hedrick Shepard's attorney? Well, yes, But he withdrew today after accusing Judge Olson of having a regrettable mental condition. And also, this was now becoming a criminal case, and his firm only handled civil cases. March 27th, Billy's mother, her body was exhumed along with that of Dr. Oscar Olson. Preliminarily, both have been found to have died of heart disease, but of course, it will take some time for all of the tests to come about. April 10th. Well, what do we have here? Billy's mother, Emma, her post-mortem tests have come back. She has enough mercury in her body to have killed 2 people. The chemist said that in all probability, the mercury poison had been given to her 10 to 15 days before she died. Coroner Wolf, quote, "It is very evident that the poison was administered to Mrs. McClintock in small doses," showing that maybe 6 or 7 portions were given her. The poison necessarily must have been administered by subterfuge on food or in medicine, and therefore it must have been given by someone in Mrs. McClintock's close confidence, one of her attendants. Certainly, she would not accept such services from strangers. The amount of mercury found is in itself proof that it was not taken as a medicine or accidentally or with suicidal intent. If that amount had been taken in one dose, resulting convulsions would have been so violent as to indicate at once to the attending physician that the patient had been poisoned. Our investigation indicates there were no convulsions, only a bloated condition of the body that seems suspicious enough to cause one witness to believe at the time a post-mortem should have been performed." End quote. Detectives verified against all of her meds prior to her death that none had mercury. Who had Mrs. McClintock been visiting out of state just prior to her death? The Shepherds. Mrs. Shepherd and Mrs. McClintock having been good friends since they both attended a college in Kansas. The Shepherds, who were named in Mrs. McClintock's will to be guardians of Billy with a fee of $15,000 per year. Witnesses are being rounded up by Judge Olson, who may as well just stop being a judge and become a private detective instead. Anywho, one said he saw Shepherd giving Billy's ma liquid from a bottle while she was down south visiting the Shepherds. Another would say she saw Billy's ma when she had stopped in St. Louis on her way to the Shepherds, and that Mrs. McClintock seemed perfectly well. What would Shepherd's attorney Stewart say about this new hullabaloo? Quote, "Our only hope for justice now remains to secure justice for Shepherd in a speedy trial. The public mind has been so thoroughly poisoned against this innocent man that it may be difficult even to secure an unprejudiced jury. I have, however, always contended that it did not make a particle of difference what they found in these bodies. There is no way in which Shepherd can be connected with what they allege." End quote. April 18th, Dr. Oscar Olson's body only contained a bit of mercury, likely due to medication, but certainly not in any quantities to have been the reason for his death. No other volatile poisons were found. April 30th, Earl Clark testified that he was offered a $5,000 bribe by one of Shepherd's attorneys. He is a former employee of Dr. C.C. Feynman. He had submitted to an interview with Attorney Stewart, along with a reporter with the Chicago Evening American, and was given whiskey. And then Stewart wanted him to sign an affidavit, one that Stewart had already drawn up. Stewart and the reporter wanted Clark to confess that the accusation against Shepherd was a frame-up between the state's attorney, Clark, Feynman, and Marchand. Later, Clark said that Stewart called him up, and Clark went to the office, said Stewart would give Clark $5,000 to sign the affidavit, and actually had a stenographer start taking dictation. Clark said, quote, "When I heard that, I walked over to the stenographer and told her she need not take any more dictation of that sort, as I was not going to sign." End quote. Oh dear. May 6th. Coroner's jury wants Mrs. Shepherd to also be held accountable for both Billy's death and his mother's death for at least having, quote, "guilty knowledge as to the administration of typhoid germs or other manner causing the death of the deceased." End quote. They believe that Mrs. McClintock, Billy's mother, was poisoned with mercury by Mr. Shepherd. Coroner's jury also agreed that Feynman should be indicted along with Shepherd. Jury could not make a determination regarding Dr. Oscar Olson. And by the next day, May 7th, Mrs. Shepherd surrendered to the police and is free from being in jail. After she provided the agreed-upon $5,000 bond, she appeared before the court and made a statement with regards to Judge Olson. Not the judge of this case, but the judge/private investigator. Quote, "I'm going to believe that the man's mind is gone. It has become a mania, an obsession with him. He's got what you might fittingly call shepherditis." End quote. At some point, a grand jury would refuse to indict Mrs. Shepard, so she's not going to be tried for anything. May 18th. At trial, prosecution wants death penalty. Shepard pleads not guilty to the 21 counts of murder, etc. Judge Lynch is presiding. Feynman's being tried separately, but will be the chief witness of this Shepard trial. We're just doing jury stuff now. May 19th. Well, one of the primo state witnesses has gone on a motor trip and was supposed to have returned the day before, but his workplace said they don't know where he is. The missing witness is Robert White, the one who corroborated Feynman, saying that White saw Shepard taking the bacteria course that Shepard denies. Whispers of a possible bribe have come about. May 25th, a letter from the missing witness, Robert White, was made public today by Assistant State Attorney Joseph Savage. The letter says, quote, "Shepard is guilty, I must admit, and he knows that I know it, and God help him when I get back. His bunch made a nervous wreck of me and also made me write a statement against my will. I am just commencing to fight Shepard and his gang." End quote. June 4th, I swear we're never going to get 12 jurors. All of this time passing since May 18th, getting a jury. June 10th, we're finally at 10 jurors now. Woo! June 12th, guess who decided to show up? Missing witness for the prosecution, Robert White. He walked in and said, quote, "Here I am, Mr. Savage. I am here to fight this thing to a finish. There is more to do than you know." End quote. Defense lost some objections, but they did win in preventing Judge Harry Olson from giving any important testimony. A co-guardian of Billy with Mrs. Shepard, a Mr. Reichman, was accused by the defense of having profited from his own guardianship of the estate. That perhaps he showed up to Chicago with no money, and then all of a sudden he was doing very well. Nothing was proved by this as far as Mr. Shepard goes, but anyway, it happened in court. June 16th, Isabel would have her relationship to Billy paraded around in public via the court as a witness. The defense attorney, Stewart, would hand over to her the letters she wrote to Billy while he was at Dartmouth. She would have to identify them. Quote, "Yes, I wrote these letters to Billy." End quote. Then Stewart would read portions of the letters, mainly to refute that she would feel that the Shepards didn't like her much. Now, let's just say that she was making those kinds of statements closer to the time they were supposed to get married, not before that. One letter, quote, "I've just been to visit your father and mother. I had a splendid time. Your father served some wine and there were other guests. You don't mind if I drink a little wine at your home, do you, dear?" End quote. "Did you write that to Billy?" Stewart asked. "Yes, I did." "And did you have a good time?" "Yes, I did." Another letter would call Mrs. Shepard a perfect dear. "Did you write that to Billy?" "Yes, I did." "And did you mean what you said? Did you enjoy yourself in Mrs. Shepard's presence, and did you think she was a perfect dear?" Quote, "I did. Then," end quote, Isabel replied, her lips twitching, emphasizing the word then. Supposedly he read from nearly a dozen letters. I won't do that, but I'm sure you get his point. June 18th. So this was odd. Prosecution would not sponsor, for lack of a better word, the testimony of Dr. C.C. Feynman. You know, the one I thought was their star witness. Instead, prosecution put it on the court itself to summon Feynman. When defense questioned the reasoning, State Attorney Crow would say, quote, "It simply means that the state does not vouch for him and does not wish to be bound by his testimony, that of a man jointly indicted with the defendant and a confessed accomplice, who more than once has changed his story." End quote. The defense contended that Mr. Crow was not acting in good faith, so Feynman was called instead as the court's witness, and Judge Lynch would interrogate him on direct, then allow the state and the defense both to cross-examine. I'm not going to get into his testimony where I know the generalities from previous testimonies. He gave a lot of details about conversations and appointments and discussions. June 24th, Shepard took the stand and had to account for many parts of his life, how he was not a successful businessman until he and his wife went to live with Mrs. McClintock after her husband died, leaving her with Billy to care for. Shepards visited her in 1909, which I believe is when she died, and since 1912, they've never had to pay for anything. Quote, my time was taken up, whatever she wanted me to do, whatever it might be, end quote. However, when the state ended their questioning, Shepard looked shocked. That was it? That was all? Apparently, the state was content to rest its case on its own witnesses rather than questioning Shepard any further or any harder. June 25th, closing arguments. Defense's Stewart would say, quote, if he had been nursing the boy to slay him, wouldn't he have gotten someone else to draw the will? That is one of the points he is going to have explained in the probate court in the will fight. He must face it. But if he had been trying to prepare an alibi, wouldn't he have somebody else draw the will so as to pass suspicions from him? End quote. Stewart would admit that Shepard had told a reporter that he hurried home to throw out of the house anybody who tried to marry Billy, but that was said from the place of being a dad, rather than anything to do with will or inheritance. June 27th, jury deliberated for 5 hours and 45 minutes. And the verdict is not guilty. So the jury did not feel that Shepard had given Billy typhoid germs so as to cause his death and get the money. 6 ballots in all. One juror held out for murder until the last ballot. So now Shepard can go into the battle of the will with clean hands. In prison since March 18th, he's now free. He does still have that murder charge with regards to Billy's ma, Mrs. McClintock, but we'll hear about that in just a mo. Judge Olson, basically lead investigator, it seems, not happy, of course. Quote, the case is still pending, despite the verdict. We have followed the trial closely, and we are certain a great deal of admissible evidence was not offered by State Prosecutor Crow, and he did not cooperate with us. It is not expected a man can be convicted of murder unless the evidence of murder is presented against him. End quote. Isabel Pope, Billy's fiancee, quote, I do not see how a jury could convict Shepard on the evidence presented, as there was so much left out, so many details that were important to the whole story. They did not ask me half the things I knew about. End quote. Uh-oh. Did the prosecution not present its best case? Robert Crow, state's attorney. Quote, the state made a good fight and lost. The verdict speaks for itself. End quote. With regards to Olson's disappointment with the state, quote, I have no reply, at least at present, for Olson. End quote. Attorney Stewart was sorry the jury was not allowed, quote, to voice its verdict against those who plotted against Shepard. End quote. But the verdict is in reality a finding of, quote, guilt for the plotters. It is another proof of the sanctity of the jury system, end quote. And now Shepard has been told he will not be prosecuted on the charge of murder regarding Mrs. Emma McClintock. State Attorney Crow, quote, there is no evidence Mrs. McClintock was murdered, and I will not press the charge, end quote. So now it's back to court with all of the will stuff. Yeah, did you forget about that part of it? We've got 10 cousins. We've got Isabel. And of course, the newly acquitted Shepard and his wife. June 29th. Feynman was free today when the murder charge against him was removed at the request of State Attorney Robert Crow. Kind of hard to charge Feynman with murder if Shepard was acquitted. July 2nd, 1925. Hearing on the will is starting. The judge for this is Judge Henry Horner. The lawyer for Shepard is Robert Stoll. Shepard literally just got acquitted. His lawyer is asking for some extra time. Orville Taylor is the counsel for the Iowa cousins and does not want a continuance. A tiny continuance was granted. The judge saying that the circumstances here were a bit unusual. Another minor continuance would be requested because Shepard was ill. July 14th. The relatives are saying that one page of the will may have been inserted into the document after signing. Taylor, the relative's lawyer, says that the handwriting appears different on the first page from the last page. Marie Gardner, a former domestic servant in the home, said that she could not read English very well and had not reviewed the document before she signed it as a witness, not even the clause directly above her signature. July 17th, Judge Horner refused to admit to probate the will on the grounds of a, quote, presumption of undue influence, end quote. Basically, it has not been disproven that Shepard did not use influence in the drawing up the will to his own benefit. Shepard, 9 cousins, and Miss Pope would immediately start a second contest over the administration of the estate. The attorneys for all would not agree on an administrator, and if they couldn't find one within a number of days, the court would name one. It's been a few days. The judge would rule that the Northern Trust Company, the managers of the estate since Billy died, would continue for at least another 20 days. July 22nd. It's been a minute since we had some fighting. Well, at the will hearing, Shepard came into contact with a man named Lewis who used to work for the Shepards, who was now a witness for the cousins. Lewis leaped at Shepard, calling him a dirty dog. Lewis struck Shepard and was pulled off of him by a deputy sheriff. Lewis would then be charged with contempt of court. Attorney Taylor for the cousins would pay Lewis's bond. Eva Nelson, another former domestic servant and witness to the will, would also admit she signed the will as witness without reading it. Quote, then these pages may have been substituted without your knowing it, end quote. Attorney Taylor asked. Quote, I don't know, end quote, she replied. Now, I thought the taxes on my house were ridiculous. The federal and state taxes on the estate will amount to $400,000. If the will awards $1 million, you're only getting $600,000. So listen to me. LOL. Only. But still, dang. And that is in 1925 terms. We're over a year later in October 1926. Isabel and other heirs brought action against Shepard regarding the will, but the Illinois Supreme Court refuses to set aside the order of the judge admitting the will to probate. Isabel and McClintock cousins wanted to break the will, but the judge said, "Nyeh." The court was not addressing the validity of the will, merely that it should be admitted to probate. The decision reading, quote, undue influence is not within the realm of inquiry, end quote. Man, sometimes judge speak is just a lot. February 1927. Shepard has been appointed executor of the will, but he was directed by the judge that funds of the estate should only be spent on court order. In other words, Shepard can't just dole out the money as he pleases. And guess what? A suit to break the will likely be filed shortly by 8 of 10 surviving relatives of McClintock. Undue influence will be the allegation. I'm assuming that again means the fact that Shepard drew up the will for Billy to sign, thus serving undue influence over Billy's actions in signing the will. At this time, Isabel is not thought to be a party to this suit. She's still supposed to be left the $8,000 per year annuity from the will. April 1927. The estate of Billy has a valuation between $1.5 and $2 million according to final accounting done. June 9, 1927. Well, Isabel Pope has now entered the ring again for a widow's share of the estate. She's charging Shepard with fraud in preventing her marriage to Billy. She wants an accounting of Shepard's management of the estate, and also she wants a receivership appointed once the suits are over with. End of 1927, we have the will trial. I'm not going to get into this too much. It's like the indictment trial. It's like the grand jury trial. It's like any other trial. We've got the same witnesses, and we're talking about the accusations all over again, even though this is about the will. And oddly enough, I didn't easily find information about this will trial's ending, but I do know the final outcome, which wouldn't come for over 2 years. September 16th, 1929. So you know that will from a long time ago when Billy died nearly 5 years ago? Apparently all things are finally settled. Shepard will receive half of Billy's estate. The other half will be divided between Isabel and 2 groups of cousins. One group from Ottumwa, Iowa, where Radar O'Reilly is from, and the other group from California. So, what do you think? I'm not going to lie, The not guilty verdict surprised me. Not like Shepard was ever seen committing murder, but his alleged interest in bacteriology, taking courses, talking about what germs could do to someone. I thought, if anything, it maybe would be a hung jury, but no, they came to a full-fledged not guilty verdict. So please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. See you next week.